Today, we're talking the top buys and sells for fantasy football ahead of week 5. And when you're making your deals this week, be sure to use our trade calculator at yardsperfantasy.com. It's fully customizable, it's free to use, and you'll never lose a trade again. Find it now at yardsperfantasy.com/trade-calculator. RIP Rashee Rice. That one hurts, man. He was on his way to a league winner season for all of us who were eating up the value in drafts this summer. But one man's misfortune is another man's opportunity. The door is now wide open for Xavier Worthy to become a significant figure in the Kansas City offense. He's certainly not going to match Rashee Rice's production. That would be silly to think that. He's not even going to be playing the same role. Rice was dominating the middle and the short areas of the field, while Worthy makes his money out wide and deep. However, that doesn't mean that Xavier Worthy is not going to get more looks. With a target commander like Rashee Rice out of the offense, those targets are going to be distributed elsewhere. And Xavier Worthy is surely going to be near the top of that list. Xavier Worthy scored extremely well in our rookie wide receiver prospect model at yardsperfantasy.com. He's a great young player, and the Chiefs recognized this when they drafted him in the first round. We can expect him to be more involved in the game plan moving forward. Again, he's not going to do the things that Rashee Rice was doing. But in the absence of Rashee Rice, Andy Reid and company are going to be looking to scheme up new ways to move the football. That's going to mean an increase in screens and jet sweeps and so forth, featuring their explosive rookie. But let me be clear, Xavier Worthy is not just a manufactured touch guy or a straight line vertical threat outside. He can run real routes. That's why we loved him so much coming out of Texas. Hopefully the Chiefs recognize this and they tap a little bit more into his route tree. Now, so far, Xavier Worthy has been a little bit hit or miss from a fantasy football perspective. He scored 2 touchdowns and scored more than 20 fantasy points in his NFL debut, but he followed that up with 2 stinkers of 4.2 and 5 fantasy points. But then in week 4, he found the end zone again on a 54-yard bomb. He's been boom or bust, which is really what we expected coming into the season. But if his volume goes up, that's only going to enhance the chances of him having a boom week. And it will make the boom weeks a little bit more boomerific. Now, don't go buying Xavier Worthy expecting him to be the next Rashee Rice or Tyreek Hill. But if Rice being out can get him up to a 20% target share, he can be a more consistent contributor. And of course, we know he has a massive ceiling. Christian Watson suffered a pretty serious ankle injury in week 4, and he's expected to miss considerable time. That opens the door for Dontayvion Wicks to become a regular part of the Packers offense. If you remember, I talked about Dontayvion Wicks as a sell just a couple weeks ago. I cited the fact that he's just not running the routes or commanding the targets necessary to be a reliable fantasy contributor, which was true, but what I failed to recognize was the contingent value that he provides. There are so few handcuff wide receivers in fantasy football, but Dontayvion Wicks is one of them. When one of the starting 3 wide receivers goes down in Green Bay, Dontayvion Wicks becomes very usable. And that was reflected in his week 4 performance when he stepped in for the injured Christian Watson. He ran 80% of the routes and he commanded a team-high 24% target share. That's what we need. And if you remember back to last season, Dontayvion Wicks finished the regular season with 4 top 36 performances over the final 6 weeks. And that included a wide receiver 5 performance in week 18. He's a playmaker with size and speed, and he has the trust of Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love. Christian Watson's expected to be out a while, so Dontayvion Wicks should be a good play for the next several weeks. And looking ahead to the Packers' upcoming opponents, the next 5 matchups are against the Rams, Cardinals, Texans, Jaguars, and Lions. It doesn't get much juicier than that. It seems like the majority of fantasy managers are treating Jordan Mason as if Christian McCaffrey's return is imminent. Maybe it is, I don't know, but I would bet we get more starts from Jordan Mason the rest of the season than we do from Christian McCaffrey. I mean, Christian McCaffrey just got back from his doctor's visit that took him halfway across the world to Germany. That doesn't really scream guy about to return. I am deeply concerned about the availability of Christian McCaffrey for the rest of the season. Last week, Kyle Shanahan admitted that Christian McCaffrey is dealing with Achilles tendonitis in both legs. And then we got the report from Ian Rappaport that suggested that we might not see Christian McCaffrey until November. I'm taking all of this information, plus McCaffrey's injury history and his 2023 workload, and aggressively trying to acquire Jordan Mason wherever I can. Mason is currently the RB5 at PPR scoring, and he scored at least 17 fantasy points in 3 of 4 games. The 49ers have entrusted him with a full-blown bell cow role, and he is thriving. He's not catching a ton of passes, but he's averaging 23 carries a game, and the touchdown opportunities are plentiful. For as long as Christian McCaffrey is out, Jordan Mason is a top 5 running back in fantasy football. And if McCaffrey does come back, Jordan Mason just becomes the #1 handcuff in fantasy, which is still a very valuable role, especially considering what we know about Christian McCaffrey's injury situation. And even if McCaffrey is cleared, it's likely he misses time again with the same or a different injury. The uncertainty around this situation means there is an opportunity to get Jordan Mason at a value on the open market. So if the Jordan Mason manager in your league believes that Christian McCaffrey is going to be back sooner than later, and the clock is about to strike midnight on his Jordan Mason shares, then swoop in and get that deal done. You could end up with the league winner of all league winners. And just to give you an idea of how I'm valuing Jordan Mason, I have him ranked inside my top 50 overall players for the rest of the season. I would take him over Travis Etienne, T. Higgins, J.K. Dobbins, or Amari Cooper, just to name a few. And if you believe Jordan Mason keeps on rolling this week against the Cardinals, then you can play this pick'em on Underdog. Lock in your pick now and use promo code YARDSPER for a free pick and a deposit offer of up to $1,000. That's promo code YARDSPER on Underdog. Let's get it. Maybe I'm a sucker for this one because Travis Kelce has been a complete dustball through the first month of the season. But watching this team, it became clear that a lot of the elements of the offense that used to be reserved for Travis Kelce had shifted towards Rashee Rice. Rice was getting a lot of those short and intermediate middle of the field looks that used to be a staple of Travis Kelce's game. And now with Rashee Rice out, those will likely go back in Travis Kelce's direction. And while he may not have the juice that he once had to be a playmaker at the position, we should start seeing the volume go back up for all 87. And given the state of the tight end position, that's really all we can ask for from a fantasy football perspective. And when we look back at week 4 when Rashee Rice left early with a knee injury, Travis Kelce was targeted on a season-high 31% of Patrick Mahomes' passes. His 7 catches on 9 targets for 89 yards was a much more familiar stat line. Don't expect to get the Travis Kelce of old, but he can still be a top 5 player at the position, getting it done on sheer volume. Before we get to my sells for week 5, if you're enjoying this video, you find it at all valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And drop your trade questions in the comments or hit me up on the Yards for Fantasy Discord. I'm always happy to help. One of my biggest mistakes this summer was overrating the Colts offense. I thought Anthony Richardson was ready to take the next step as a passer. Instead, he may have even taken a step backwards. Don't get me wrong, I still believe in Anthony Richardson. He's a young, developing quarterback. It's just not there yet, and he may be a little bit farther than I realized. Unfortunately, that carries over to his pass catchers. Michael Pittman thrived in 2023 with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. The volume of the offense was high, and Michael Pittman commanded targets like a true alpha wide receiver. The target share is still there in 2024, but the volume and the efficiency has cratered. And like Richardson, I still do like Michael Pittman from a dynasty perspective, but I am out in redraft. And luckily for those of us who did draft Michael Pittman, week 4 opened up a nice sell window. That's because Michael Pittman saw a season-high 9 targets, and he caught 6 of those for 113 yards, and he scored 17.3 fantasy points. That was much more in line with what we saw from last year and what we were expecting from this season. However, with Anthony Richardson getting injured on the first possession, all of that production came from the right arm of Joe Flacco. And Flacco was a massive upgrade for all Colts pass catchers. If he was the weekly starter in Indianapolis, I'd be all over Michael Pittman. But with Anthony Richardson expected to miss minimal time, if any, I'm trying to cash out while I can. Sell low, I don't care. It's over for Kyle Pitts. Everyone wanted to blame the coach for Kyle Pitts' struggles over the last 2 years, but it's becoming very clear that the fantasy football community was overrating him all along. While guys like Elijah Higgins and Tyler Conklin were running 90% of the routes in their offense in week 4, Kyle Pitts was running 67%. He's not getting the targets, his route participation has dropped every week, and he's the tight end 16 in fantasy points. He has just 8 catches through 4 games. 8! At some point, we just have to accept that he's not the guy that he was made out to be. He's not a good inline tight end, and he's not a good wide receiver. We see it all the time with these tweener tight end types. It just doesn't work. They don't fit anywhere in an offense. The name value should allow you to get something back in return from whatever sucker in your league still believes in Kyle Pitts. I'm out.